What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some of my gaming guilty pleasures, because I put out a few videos over the past week or so, games I wanted to play more of, and then a video talking about an old favorite of mine, and I got a few comments on each of those asking me for this exact video, actually, and much to my surprise, it is not a video I have made previously, which is a bit shocking because it seems like exactly the kind of thing I would do, and so here we are. Now, like many of you, I imagine, I have plenty of games that I probably shouldn't be playing for one reason or another, in my case, typically because I have a lot of work to do, and that of course comes with playing other video games when this is your job, but there are certainly a couple others in there as well where there's a few other factors in why it is a bit of a guilty pleasure, but ultimately at the core of it I thought it would be fun to talk about, and so here we are. And with no further ado, let's actually dive into it, kicking it off first and foremost with PowerWash Simulator. So I don't really cover it on the channel much, but I actually kind of love PowerWash Simulator. I made, I think, a single video about it, which was kind of a jokey video about how it was this incredible RPG, and I thought it was very funny at the very least, but that nonetheless comes from a very specific place. PowerWash Simulator, in my opinion, is a strangely fantastic game because it is a very relaxing game. And while it initially released all the way back in 2022, it got a lot of updates. I mean, we're talking just tons upon tons of DLC, both free and paid. Which brings me to the first part of this being a guilty pleasure. I have played the vast majority of those, and I have obviously never made a video about any of them. The reason for that being is that I find this to be an incredibly relaxing game, and it is just a bizarre experience to turn on this like weirdly zen simulator game that just has you making extremely specific progress while also cleaning a bunch of stuff, and it just hits that exact right, like almost ASMR vibe that is not my usual thing, but for whatever reason I love it here. Point being, I've probably played this more than you would think. In fact, I still plan on jumping back into it to check out their final update because I believe they're working on a sequel that I will also enjoy playing. But perhaps the guiltiest part of this is that I have both a power washer and an actual house that occasionally needs to be power washed, and it does kind of feel incredibly silly to be doing this in a video game in this really relaxing way, but knowing that if I actually go power wash my house, it's mostly going to be a headache. And it makes for a very sort of silly juxtaposition, and I suppose that's what it is of course doing on a list like this. Now this second one I have talked about relatively recently. I made a video about it, which is none other than Forgotten Realms Demon Stone. The crux of that video that I made is how Demon Stone's not really a very good game. I just kind of love it because I used to play it when I was a kid a lot, and learning that it was getting a proper Steam release, I believe it's been available on GOG forever, I'm aware. Nonetheless, it got a Steam release, and I just needed to add it to my collection. It was like $10, you know, whatever. And something about playing through that and of course just seeing all these characters that I used to have so much love for as a kid, despite it being honestly kind of cringe now, is really funny for starters. But to give a specific example, one thing I remembered is that the mage Ilias, I actually kind of co-opted that name for a ton of characters across like RPGs and stuff where you could actually name your characters, mind you. In the years that followed, I'm like 90% sure I had a character in World of Warcraft named Ilias. But there's also just something really comical about being able to acknowledge that a game is just straight up not good, but also really, really want to play it. And I plan on doing pretty much exactly that when I have a little bit of time over the holidays. I'd like to give it a run through or two. It's a relatively short game, mind you, but just in sort of recording footage and making that video, I had such a blast with it. And it's not exactly productive time spent, but it is very fun. Now, for our third entry here, we have a bit of an odd one. You see, I reviewed The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall earlier this year. It was the first time I had played through it in full, but I had played it previously, and I don't know what it was about playing that for the review specifically, but it has stayed installed on my computer since then, and I just really enjoy when I have like 10 or 15 minutes just starting it up, making a character I know I'm never going to play like in full, and then just closing it out and then doing it again a couple days later. I get so much joy out of just making characters in Daggerfall. precisely because you get this like extremely specific set of options. You can give all these like negatives and bonuses that then affect like how much experience they would theoretically gain if you played them beyond the character creation screen anyway. And while it's nothing to look at visually, to be sure, what it does allow you to do is just create like a hyper specialized character. One that might not even be fun to play. In fact, it might be a bit of a nightmare with a bunch of optional challenge stuff. Like you can make your character just straight up unable to use most stuff, or have like these absolutely crippling weaknesses that would get you demolished. And it's just really fun to like come up with an idea, have that character represented in this weird game, and then what I'd like to do, but unfortunately don't have the time, is just spend a couple hours trying to figure out how that character would even work. And I get so much weird joy out of doing this specific thing, knowing full well it's like a waste of time. I'm never going to have the ability to even test out most of these characters, but it's still really fun, and I'm probably going to keep doing it, which is why it's on this list. Now, in a bit of a different direction, we have a series that I don't really cover at all, and that is none other than Pokemon, because you see this one comes with a bit of a confession. As this entire channel may have made you aware, I'm a bit of a nerd. I grew up a nerd, actually. In fact, I grew up as a nerd when being a nerd was not a cool thing to be. But that's a story for a different video, I suppose. The thing is, though, growing up as a kid in the 90s and early 2000s, especially if you like nerdy stuff, Pokemon was probably going to come your way. It was just huge at the time. And certainly still is, but, you know, it was a different kind of popularity, I guess. But what makes this a guilty pleasure is that I never stopped playing them. I have and continue to play the mainline entries. I don't really cover Nintendo, so it doesn't come up on the channel much, but I have an entire roster of extremely old Pokemon that I have managed to hang on to by just transferring them forward through games and stuff, as you could from just, old cartridges and copies that I've had. I have an entire roster of some of my favorites and their shiny versions that I specifically used egg hatching methods to farm. And I guess my point is I played a lot of Pokemon over the years, and will probably continue to do so with every new iteration. And what makes that really a guilty pleasure for me is that those games have done so little evolving over the years, it's actually kind of ridiculous. My favorite generation was third, though more recently, Sun and Moon I think were a lot better than a lot of their previous stuff, and even a couple of the more later renditions. And without turning this into an hour-long thing, suffice it to say that I have enough Pokemon knowledge to have opinions about all of the generations. I also have a lot of opinions about the series I think stagnating in many ways, and I think it can and should be miles better than it actually is. And yet every time a mainline game releases, I jump in and check it out, and it is, I would say, the epitome of a guilty pleasure. But nonetheless, that does bring us to our final entry, and this is none other than The Elder Scrolls Online. Now, if you've watched much of my channel, you're probably aware of two things. One, I don't play a lot of MMOs these days, but also that I previously used to play a lot of ESO. This is because I'm a big fan of The Elder Scrolls, as you would imagine, and as I've talked about previously, one thing I really, really enjoy about The Elder Scrolls Online is that they have the opportunity to dig into like really niche lore topics with their various yearly updates and things like that bring you to different provinces, and just have, again, the opportunity to get into like much more niche lore than the mainline series typically does. And the single player aspect of that is really fun. Now, I will say just straight away, the MMO part of it is my least favorite part of it, and that's kind of what makes this a guilty pleasure. You see, probably once a year, usually around the holidays, I will typically jump into ESO just to kind of take a look at some of the zones and storylines that they've put up over the year, which is something I really only have like time to do, typically at the end of December when things are pretty quiet, and I'm usually taking a couple days off for Christmas and sometimes New Year. And something I will do during those times is play through ESO and kind of see what they had going on for stories for the year. And I guess what makes it a guilty pleasure is I just know that I'm not into the multiplayer aspect of it. Like, there's a huge portion of that game that I don't want to engage with in any capacity. And that, with, typically having other work that I could be doing, always makes me feel like it's a tad unproductive on my end, but I still just enjoy that world so much that it's always kind of fun to dig into those topics. And so it's kind of, for the last several years, been a bit of a holiday ritual of mine to play that for a couple of days, just on my own. If only to tide me over till the Elder Scrolls 6, I suppose. But I think that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting, as I had a lot of fun making it, to be honest. But by all means, let me know what you think about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.